Well, that last video about Greg Koukl from Stand to Reason was an absolute blast in my opinion, so let's take a look at this one that expands on it. But before we really get into this, let me say something to anyone who clicked on this video based on the thumbnail, thinking that it's a video about Christianity being a threat in and of itself rather than being based on a threat. It's actually a really relevant question these days. When I make a video about Christianity, I tend to get Christians commenting on my videos telling me, Christianity isn't a threat. You should be spending your time dealing with social justice and Islam. Those are the important subjects today. And weirdly enough, it's not just Christians who do that. I've even run into a lot of atheists who say the same thing, thinking that the threat of Christianity is totally neutralized in the world and there's nothing left to be done. Or that Christianity is an ally against social justice and Islam, and so nobody should ever criticize it, because that might alienate our allies. Well, they're all wrong. Sure, it's absolutely true that there are various other ideologies that also have to be talked about, but enemies that you think that you've defeated and you're not paying attention to anymore can be just as dangerous as the ones you're actively fighting at the moment. And that goes double when you haven't actually even weakened that enemy. Even in just the context of YouTube, where people tend to think that the atheists took over a long time ago, Christianity is strong, and it's getting stronger. In fact, it's flourishing more than it ever has, with more audience than it ever had, and in some ways it's getting crazier than it ever was. But regardless, it's still pushing the same kinds of credulity and misanthropy that it always did. And in the offline world, especially in America, it's even worse. It just keeps on spreading its poisonous lies and discouraging critical thought. And any belief system that orders you to turn off your critical faculties should be discussed and debunked. And in the American context, the #1 culprit for that is Christianity. I know the new popular thing to blame is social justice, and yes, that's true to a large extent, but Christianity is still worse. And yet, on YouTube, it's a rare subject for criticism these days, and it should make you nervous when the most powerful force for the advertisement of delusion in your country is the one that receives the least attention. So as always, I'm gonna criticize Christianity and Christians when I feel like it, and I hope that more content creators will join me in doing so. And if just criticizing the ideology of people who are supposedly my allies in opposition to other ideologies is enough to alienate and lose those allies, well, so be it, because in that case, it sounds like their alliance is only a technique to manipulate me into self-censorship. It's not gonna happen. But enough on that tangent, let's get to the real topic.
Have you ever heard this challenge? Christianity is based on threats.
I'm not sure if that's a challenge so much as it is a blunt statement of fact.
Well, I have. And I guess initially it sounds hard to answer because what is the threat? I mean, that might be a question to ask. Clarification question.
Oh, but isn't it obvious? The threat is, if you don't do your homework, you're not getting ice cream. Greg, everyone knows what threat we're talking about here. Let's not pretend that's a legitimate point of confusion.
Well, you say that if you don't believe in Jesus, you go to hell. You see, that's a threat.
Yes, that is indeed a threat. And as we saw in the last video, that's exactly what you think, too. So I guess we're done here. Argument over.
People don't go to hell because they don't believe in Jesus, all right? Just as a point of information. People go to hell because they do bad things.
People go to hell to receive infinite torture because they do bad things. More specifically, bad things on the level of severity of sometimes annoying their spouse.
If he said he didn't do any bad things, I want to talk to his wife, you know? No, of course not. We all know we've done wrong things.
So in other words, everyone goes to hell. Oh, right, unless they believe in Jesus. So God's gonna make up an excuse to hold everything anyone ever did that not every single person around them was totally ecstatic about, as well as presumably jerking off, as a half-assed excuse to torture them forever. Everyone is getting royally fucked by God's obsession with the smell of roasted human. Oh, but if they believe in him and accept him as their savior, he'll stop dangling them over the fire pit for no reason. Greg? That's a threat! If a kid did that to a mouse, you'd be worried he's turning into a dangerous psycho and you'd think he needs therapy. Oh, sorry, never mind, you wouldn't think that. You'd think he needs to be set on fire forever, because your religion already turned you into a dangerous psycho.
And if you go to the book of Revelation, there at the end, you see the great white throne judgment. It's clear what the criteria of judgment is. It's not whether you believed in Jesus or not. It's whether you did bad things or not.
Oh, okay, so God's sitting there on his big white throne with two people in front of him. Both of them have done bad, horrible things in their lives. Yep, when they were 2, they both said no when their mom told them to stop pulling things off the kitchen counter. Ugh, what reprehensible scum they are. Infinitely evil they are. So God looks at them both and he sees that one of them believed in Jesus and accepted him as his Lord and Savior, and the other one did not. And since that's not the criterion for whether someone goes to hell or not, he dumps both the fuckers in the pit along with every other human who ever lived. That's how it works, is it, Greg? No? Then stop making an ass of yourself.
And the people who do bad things end up being punished for that.
Oh, never mind, I spoke too soon. Maybe you do think that's how it works. All the people who do bad things get punished, regardless of whether they believed in Jesus or not. yeah, that probably is what you believe.
People who trusted in the Savior get rescued from that. That's the rescue, but that's not the grounds for the punishment, okay?
Of course it's okay, Greg. It's always okay to admit when you've been lying. Thanks for coming clean. Right, so everyone's going to hell except the people who believe in Jesus. So that means... what does that mean? Oh, it means that belief in Jesus is the sole criterion that decides if you're going to hell or not. So in other words, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell for not believing in Jesus. If God had those two dudes standing in front of him for the judgment, and he saw that one of them believed in Jesus and the other one didn't, the one that believed is going to heaven and the one that didn't is going to hell, based on just that one difference between them. The guy that goes to hell because he did not believe in Jesus. This is not hard. And you know what? In the last video, you even admitted this.
So if I would have answered the question, yes, unless you believe that Jesus is the Messiah, then you will die in your sins, you will go to hell. I would have answered correctly, but I would have really given the wrong impression.
So that's one thing just to get squared away.
Good. Great. We've squared it away now. We've put it in its little square box and put it in its little square corner with a little square label that says, you go to hell because you don't believe in Jesus.
Here's a second thing to think of. There's two kinds of threats, I guess. One of them is, give me your money or I'll shoot you. All right?
Yeah, okay, and that's exactly the kind we're dealing with. What's the other kind?
Another one is a doctor who says, if you don't get the surgery, you're going to die.
Okay, so that doctor's supposed to be an analogy for God, I guess, but he's really not. So let me see if I can adjust it just a tiny bit to make it fit. So it's a doctor, we'll call him Dr. Jigsaw, and he roofies some lady, and while she's asleep, he chains her to a conveyor belt leading into a furnace. And she wakes up and she hears a videotape that says,
"Hello, Sally. You're probably wondering where you are, but I know you've seen my movies, so I'll skip it. I saw you in the restaurant, Sally. You had a wonderful waitress, but you only tipped her 15%. Waitresses have a hard job, Sally. So now I have a hard job for you. Somewhere inside your intestines is a key. You can use the scalpel next to you to dig it out within the next 5 minutes. Or you can die when the furnace underneath you switches on. Live or die. Make your choice."
Times infinity, of course. When we're talking about God, it's always times infinity.
Now, we would never say that the doctor is trying to threaten us by telling us the natural consequences of our behavior.
Now, we would never say Jigsaw is threatening us by telling us the natural consequences of our behavior in the scenario he created.
When the timer in the back goes off, your mouth will be permanently ripped open. Think of it like a reverse bear trap.
He's trying to help us.
You want to play a game? Here's what happens if you lose.
Helped me.
He's giving us a way out. He's showing us a rescue.
A rescue from a scenario he put us in. He attached a bear trap to your jaws and told you how to escape it, which in this case is by worshipping him for the rest of your life.
You will give everything to me. Every cell in your body.
Seriously, dude, how can you sit there describing how God is exactly like a horror movie villain and yet still have absolutely no problem with it? For once in your damn life, listen honestly to how you sound right now. Oh, and by the way, not successfully taking the offered rescue means
Game over.
Just like with Jigsaw's games, if you lose, it's because you didn't do what the game's creator told you to. So arguing about whether it's a rescue or not means absolutely nothing. Rescue or not, you're still going to hell for disbelieving. Of course, it's not quite the same as Jigsaw. At least Jigsaw provides some really, really compelling evidence that you're stuck in his sick game. God won't provide even that simple courtesy. Oh, and the fact that one way or another, eventually you're gonna get out of Jigsaw's game. Even if you lose, at least at some point you're gonna die.
We are on a path that is a dismal, dangerous path, and unless we divert the actions that we've been taking and do something else, the doctor says we're gonna die.
You have been on a dismal, dangerous path, Gregory. You stole a chocolate bar when you were 6 years old, and now you have a choice. You can choose to accept your punishment, and the furnace below you will start up, engulfing you in the flames you have earned. Or you can dedicate your life to serving me and be spared. Make your choice.
That's an act of kindness.
Yeah, that's what Jigsaw's accomplice thought too after he indoctrinated her into his fucked up worldview. But of course you're both wrong. Jigsaw was not a kind serial killer. And if God holds you over a torture pit, he doesn't suddenly become kind if he tells you, hey, worship me and I won't drop you in. Much less if he just drops you in without even making you aware that you're part of his sick game in the first place. In that case, it's even worse, changing from Jigsaw's style of hideously cruel but winnable games to his accomplice's style of unwinnable games.
So look at God offers forgiveness to people who disobey.
No, he doesn't. The message is you did some things I didn't like, each of which of course earned you a punishment of being burned alive until the end of time and beyond, and you still completely deserve it, but you've managed to convince yourself of what I ordered you to believe, so I'll spare you. That's not what forgiveness is. Let's say your wife drank the last bit of juice that was in the fridge and you wanted to drink it, and that pissed you off so much that you wanted to beat her to a bloody pulp. And you told her that, but you said, you know what, give me a blowjob and I won't beat you. And you kept your word, but you kept hanging on to that grudge about the juice for the next 50 years. Was that an act of forgiveness? No, obviously not. You just extorted a blowjob from her.
That's an act of kindness.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she really thinks so, yeah. She knows you do it all because you love her, right? Jesus Christ, how can people think like this?
People say no. Okay, I get it.
No, you don't. You really, really don't. I haven't said no to a damn thing because I don't think anyone actually made that offer. I don't think there's anyone there to make it. Well, except for you and your fellow cultists, and you can all get fucked. But if I actually thought that God was making me this offer, if I actually thought he was holding me over an infinite torture pit, and the only way out was for me to convince myself of some bullshit, I would try my best to convince myself of that bullshit. At the very least, I would pay lip service to it, you know, fake it till you make it. But luckily, it's pretty goddamn likely that that's not the case.
And as a result, they are punished for the crimes they have committed against God.
What crimes? What specifically have I done that warrants me writhing in screaming, burning agony forever, in your opinion, Greg? You're telling me I should be the victim of that. You're telling me I've earned it. You're telling me I deserve it, so you better have a real good fucking reason for it, you freak. Tell me what specifically I have done that is that bad. Personally, I can't think of anything anyone could possibly do that's infinitely severe. I don't think that's even something within the realm of human capability, especially when you consider that there would be no way for a human to harm God in any way at all. How can you commit a crime against a being you can't hurt? What are we gonna do, man? Shake a spear at the sky? Oh yeah, I bet that really hurts him. I bet he loses a lot from that. Yeah, I bet his lawyer would have a real easy time demonstrating harm when that goes to court. Ugh. By the way, I've heard a certain kind of argument that's meant to prove that your crimes against God really are infinite, and your punishment really should be infinite, and I found a version of it on the Stand to Reason website that you write and make videos for, Greg. Not to mention that you're the founder and president. So, we have time here, right? Let's take a little tangent and take a look at that. Some guy named Jonathan Edwards apparently made this argument.
The crime of one being despising and casting contempt on another.
Yeah, okay, right off the bat, that's not a crime. Even under totalitarian regimes which will punish you for saying a single thing that is not wholly approving of the party, your opinions are still not crimes, mostly because they can't see inside your head. But leaving that aside, your sincere opinions are just features of you. They're not even things you do. Crimes are things you do. And you can choose to act on your opinions or not. But the opinions themselves are not actions, they're not crimes. You're not under any obligation not to despise anyone and not to feel contemptuous towards anyone. And if someone feels that way towards someone else, they should not be punished. If someone was punished for that in your country, would you honestly approve of it? I don't think so. You'd probably be really angry because of how incredibly unfair it is.
The crime is proportionably more or less heinous as he was under greater or less obligations to obey him.
Well, as I said, it's not a crime, but I guess you're talking about expressing your feelings, saying something, doing something, not just feeling your feelings. In which case, sure, if you're in a courtroom, say, where they're trying to maintain order so the justice system can function efficiently, they'll punish you for talking back to the judge too much for practical reasons. Or are you talking more along the lines of a king who's managed to obtain more power than you have, and so he insists that you have to obey him completely? Well, that is what you're talking about. You're talking about God.
And therefore, if there be any being that we are under infinite obligation to love, honor, and obey...
Wow, that is creepy.
The contrary towards him must be infinitely faulty.
Okay, well, no such being exists. Even if God exists, no such being exists. You have no obligation to obey anyone. Sure, they can threaten you until you feel like there's no way for you to safely disobey, but that's the best it gets. It's a threat. And typically that's how authority is established. It's something that's built based on power. Authority and being deserving of your obedience are not some inherent properties of a being. And that goes double, actually not even double, that goes many times over for love and honor. Love and honor have to be real feelings. They have to be freely given and genuinely felt. They can't be taken by force. You can't be obligated to feel them. If you don't feel love for someone, or if you don't find them honorable, that's not a criminal act towards them. It's just how you feel. And maybe if they want to make you feel differently, they should act differently, or find someone else who'll love them. The people who feel like it's a crime for someone else not to love and honor them are called stalkers, or dictators.
Our obligation to love, honor, and obey any being is in proportion to his loveliness, honorableness, and authority.
No, again, the idea of being obligated to love and honor anyone is just creepy. I don't even know how you got to the point of thinking that that's how love and honor work, but as for obedience, what makes you obligated to obey someone with authority is not that obedience is an inherent good or inherently important or whatever. I mean, Adolf Hitler had massive authority. Joseph Stalin had massive authority. And some people felt that it was their moral duty to obey them because they had that authority, and look what happened. These people were the Jonathan Edwards types, the Christian types, who think that might makes right and disobedience to any authority is a terrible criminal action deserving of all the punishment that it leads to. Other people obeyed them only to ensure their own survival because authority is backed up by force, and the full force of an authoritarian regime like that is heavy. People are going to do what they have to do. The obligation to obey someone in authority doesn't come from the inherent goodness of obeying, but from the force behind the authority. And just having lots of force to back up your orders doesn't make you worthy of people's obedience. It doesn't put them morally in the wrong if they disobey you. And then there were still other people, the heroes, who disobeyed those rulers completely and fought against their tyranny and paid the price for it, a lot of them. And apparently Jonathan Edwards is really happy they paid that price because they were just immoral scum, because they're morally obligated to obey the authorities.
But God is a being infinitely lovely, because he hath infinite excellency and beauty.
No, he doesn't. You slap those labels on him, sure, but that doesn't make it true. The God as described by Christianity is a mean, ugly little brute and unlovable in the extreme. But I know, you want some excuse to believe that I deserve to be tortured forever. You really want to believe that that's the case because you really like that thought, so you'll insist that no, he is objectively, infinitely, lovely, excellent, and beautiful just because you called him that. But lovely, excellent, beautiful, these are all subjective terms. So maybe you really do find him infinitely lovely, infinitely excellent, and infinitely beautiful. Okay, well, he's not objectively those things, because those are subjective terms. But you know what? Let's pretend they are. He really is infinitely lovely, excellent, and beautiful. Objectively, somehow. Well, am I morally obligated to think so? I mean, let's say we go to an art gallery, right? And you show me a painting, and you say, this painting is so beautiful, and that painting really is objectively beautiful. In fact, objectively, it's the most beautiful painting in the world. And I say, you know, I'm not really seeing it. I kind of think it's a little bit ugly. It's just not my taste. Am I not supposed to be punished? Are you going to punch me in the face? Should the cops haul me away? Because if not, your argument makes no goddamn sense.
So sin against God, being a violation of infinite obligations, must be a crime infinitely heinous, and so deserving infinite punishment.
Sin, just in general? You started out specifically mentioning despising and casting contempt upon God. That's one thing, maybe two. That's what the whole argument has been about up until now. But now you're just talking about any sin. You know, if you really, really love and honor God and you believe that he thinks your gay marriage is A-okay, but you're mistaken and really he doesn't approve. You love honoring and obeying what you think he wants, but you're wrong. That type of sin wasn't addressed here in any way, but now we've just leapt from a specific sin to all sins for no reason at all. But okay, aside from that, apparently we're focusing on the obedience and authority thing now, so God is infinitely powerful, and he claims a position of infinite authority over you and demands your obedience, and therefore, what? You're morally obligated to do everything he wants, and if you don't, you deserve infinite punishment because he claimed infinite authority? It just straight up might makes right. Hitler did nothing wrong, Stalin was a great guy, might makes right. If some gang takes over a neighborhood and they start demanding tolls from people to pass through, those people are morally obligated to pay up. And if they don't, they're bad people and they deserve the curb stomping they're gonna get if they don't. And the stronger and more authoritative that gang is, the more they should make it hurt. This is lunacy. I don't understand how supposedly good people can buy into this garbage. It's like they don't even understand what these very human concepts of love, honor, and authority even are, or how they work, or what they're for. But then again, we are talking about a slave owner here, so it makes sense that he'd want people to think like this. Keeps his property from misbehaving.
The eternity of the punishment of ungodly men renders it infinite infinite, and therefore renders no more than proportionable to the heinousness of what they are guilty of.
The king was the ruler of all that the eye could see, and everyone around recognized his absolute authority and loveliness and honorableness. And therefore, when the king learned that a peasant once said disparaging things about the king was entirely justified in punishing that peasant in proportion with his authority. So the peasant was placed in the dungeon for daily whippings for 40 years, and then hanged in proportion with the heinousness of his crimes. Praise Jesus.
It's not a threat.
It's a threat. The worst kind of threat. The kind of threat made by the extremely powerful to the extremely weak, demanding absolute submission, or else he will subject them to the worst things within his power. Your God is a fiend, and so are you for approving of it.
Look, if I offered you a rescue, or any other human being offered you a rescue, that would be an act of kindness.
Oh yeah, it's so kind, you know, you're just holding me down with my face next to a bonfire made of corpses, and you're telling me that if I'm a good slave, and I go back to the other slaves and extol your not at all threatening helpfulness all day long every day, you'll spare me. Oh, thank you, so kind. If you think that's kind, I'd hate to see what you consider cruel.
Why is it when God offers a rescue from the most dangerous threat around,
which he created and is threatening us with,
that's considered a threat?
Because that's what the word threat means, imbecile. You know what, Greg? I'm curious. You ever been mugged? When some guy pulls a gun on you and says, "Give me your wallet or else," do you thank him for providing such a gracious rescue to you? Such an easy way out, and you happily hand over your wallet? Or do you feel, I don't know, a little threatened? See, Greg, it doesn't matter one bit if it's God or a person doing it. When someone issues a threat, it's a threat, because words mean things. But the reality of the situation is that we're not really comparing statements by humans to statements by God, are we? We're comparing statements made by humans to other statements made by humans. Up until now in this video, I've been talking as if God exists for the sake of argument, but let's get real. Every indication points to the fact that the only person making statements about what God is gonna do, the only person using threats to manipulate other people, is you. Well, you and everyone like you. Hell is just a fantasy used by people like you to scare people into submission to your will, just like how previously it scared you into submission to someone else's will, and so on all the way back through the ages. Well, I'm calling your bluff, friendo. You just walked into my convenience store and you're trying to rob me by sticking your finger under your t-shirt and pretending like it's a gun, in such a painfully obvious bluff that I almost feel sorry for you. And I'm telling you, take your hand out of your shirt, dude, you're embarrassing yourself. And you say, "Oh, I wish I could, but this guy outside told me I have to. He's got his hand under his shirt and I'm pretty sure he's got a gun." So stupid. So the point is, it makes no sense for you to whine that we're holding humans and gods to different standards of what constitutes a threat, because the only threats we've talked about in this video were ones made by humans. And by the way, it's ironic to hear you bitching about people holding God and humans to different standards as the closing to a video dedicated to excusing behavior from your God that you would never in a million years accept from any human being. Said Logicked, hoping he wasn't giving Greg too much credit.
He is rescuing us from the threat of eternal damnation.
Yes! You finally get it! Eternal damnation is his threat. He's threatening us with eternal damnation. That's the or else part of the threat. And Jesus is the give me your wallet bit. I don't know why it took you a whole video to get to that simple fact, which is by definition true, but I guess when you've taken the threats to heart and you think you need to believe that words don't mean what they mean or you're gonna get tortured, it's gonna be pretty hard to convince you that you're safe and that you can stop singing the dear leader's praises. Well, that was gross. Anyway, if you want to see more videos, subscribe and thumb up this video, and if you really like my videos, consider supporting me on Patreon, and I will see you on the next one.